welcome back to the very last session of Chapter 2 Meet the Legends. I'm Trina, the Southeast Asia Teaching Fellow for NewsLab. Thank you for sticking through with us throughout Chapter 1 and 2, and we hope you have found your teammates or will do so in preparation for Chapter 3. To those of you who are new to this, welcome, and we are happy to have you join us on this journey as we traverse through the world of fact-checking. Now, a few housekeeping notes for those who missed out the earlier sessions. We will be throwing random questions during the presentation. You can respond on chat with your answer and registered nickname in brackets. We will only award points to the top 3 participants who answer correctly and the fastest for each question. Swag will be given to those who attended all 4 sessions of Chapter 2 and responded to the questions on chat. Now, if you have questions for our guest speakers today, please type in your questions at the bottom of the video under the Ask a Question box. Now, I know some of you have been asking about the swag. Apologies for the delay as we are a very small team, but we will be sending out the email out to those who qualify for Chapter 1 swag within the next 2 weeks. Please give us a few weeks after Chapter 2 ends to sort out the Chapter 2 swag list as well. So this is not a fake program, and we do live up to our words, okay? We just need a bit more time and patience from you. Now, today's speaker comes from one of the world's most populous country in the world, India. With nearly 45% of the country's 1.37 billion people having access to the internet, misinformation has obviously become a huge problem. But the good news is that in India, there are many fact-checking organizations that have come up in recent years. One of them is a fact-checking unit inside a news portal called The Quint. Kritika is leading the unit called WEBQOOF, and she's here today to share with us the work that she does and some interesting debunks that WEBQOOF has recently done. So let's welcome Kritika.
Hi, Trina. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that. Really good to be here. And hi, everybody. I'm extremely excited to be interacting with all of you. As Trina said, whatever questions you have, please feel free to ask. And in between, we'll be asking you some quiz questions. So I hope you'll all be attentive. I'll jump right into it. As Trina mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about fact checking in India. And the name of the vertical that I lead is called WEBQOOF. But what do we do? What is WEBQOOF? What is the sort of work we've been doing? So WEBQOOF is the Quint's IFCN certified fact-checking arm. The Quint is the name of the organization that I work for. It's a digital newsroom. And we've been fact-checking since April 2017. The vertical was started in response to the kind of misinformation and disinformation we saw around the US presidential elections in 2016. After working in collaboration with other fact checkers, where mostly we were reproducing the kind of content they were producing, the fact checks they were producing, and amplifying the fact checks they were doing, we set up our own team and we started doing our own debunks, and we started doing all sorts of work that we are doing today. Somewhere in 2017, in the second half of the year. We're a team of 7 fact checkers, and we do fact checking in 2 languages, English and Hindi. What kind of fact checks do we do? What kind of subjects do we cover? We cover politics, we cover health, we track online misinformation, we cover data stories, and there's honestly a lot more that we do. I'll try and take you through all of it as much as I can, and as much in detail as I can. And finally, as I said, we also cater to really, really young audiences like yourselves. So our motive is to make fact checking easy, accessible, and very interesting for all of you, so that it doesn't look very intimidating to people as generally they say. So for that also, we're trying to make our fact checking as accessible as possible, for which we're playing with different formats. For instance, we play around with reels, we make videos, we put out text stories, but that's something we're trying to do so that we can reach as many people as possible. Some of our work that we've done so far, as I mentioned, that there's a series that we've started which is called Verify Kiya Kya, loosely translates to Have You Verified It Yet? The idea again is to make fact checking and media literacy, to basically explore the nuances of fact checking and media literacy, and to make it very simple and easy and comprehend, and you can, so something that you can comprehend, not something that you should be scared of. If somebody sends you something, the first thought should be that I should be able to do it on my own, instead of being, maybe it's going to take a lot of my time. So that's the whole purpose of starting this series. I'm going to play a very short clip from the series to show you how we are trying to make this series interactive, how we're trying to use the resources that we have in the best possible manner so that the audiences like you can relate to it.
Any attempt to ask them to move to a designated prayer space will be labeled discrimination. क्या कर रहे हैं यार ये लोग देश का? रोहन को बता क्या तुम्हें? रोहन, रोहन,
क्या हुआ पापा?
देख देख, ट्रैफिक रोकते हैं ये लोग, एम्बुलेंस रोकते हैं, देख।
अरे पापा, दिस इमेज इज नॉट इवन फ्रॉम इंडिया, ये तो बांग्लादेश से है, देखो।
अच्छा बेटा, थोड़ा ना प्रेशर आ गया मैं।
अरे पापा,
any attempt to ask them to move.
So the idea behind playing that video was to show you that we're not, again, it's not to make fact checking intimidating. It's to tell people that, listen, if there's a picture that comes on your social media platforms, if there's a picture that comes on your WhatsApp, you can fact check it on your own. That video was about image verification, and we'd spoken to our audiences about the tools and tricks and techniques that are available in the public domain and the ones that you can use. Something other than verify kiya kya, something which, as I mentioned earlier, that politics is a topic, that is a subject that we're tracking very closely. Another series that we have, it's called Neta Fact Check. I'm sure most of you would know. Neta in Hindi, Neta is a Hindi word which basically means politician. We fact check claims made by them during their political speeches, their rallies, to tell the audience what the truth is. What do we do for that? For that, we go through data which is available in the public domain. We go through information which is available in the public domain. We go through answers which are given in the parliament. In fact, we also speak to experts. We sometimes go through data which has been collected by researchers, made available by independent organizations. The idea being, we're trying to provide evidence, we're trying to support everything that we are doing with evidence. So basically corroborating everything that you do with evidence. So Neta Fact Check, or political claims that we fact check, that's another series that is something we're very closely working on. Again, the idea is to make the audience aware, is to make the people aware of everything that that the politicians are doing, so that they can take an informed decision. Fit WEBQOOF, again, I had mentioned that health is a topic which is something we're covering, and in the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we've all seen lots and lots of misinformation related to COVID-19. But even before COVID struck, we were debunking misinformation related to health. Now, there's one thing that I want to emphasize on over here. When you're talking about health related misinformation, there's something very important and critical that you have to remember. When you speak to an expert or when you speak to a doctor, what is important is that you're not positioning their opinion as a fact check. What we do is we go through literature, we speak to experts, we speak to doctors, we see what does the literature say on a certain claim, and then we debunk that piece of misinformation. Because I think it's very important to not quote somebody as saying that they think or they say or they claim, because then that's not a fact check. That's probably somebody's opinion we're trying to package as a fact check. So health misinformation is also something which we are tracking very, very closely. And thanks to a team that we have, a team of health journalists that we have, we work very closely with the doctors, or team of doctors, scientists, experts, who help us debunk all of these claims. Uh, Now, when we talk about fact checking, a lot of times we don't realize that there are nuances of fact checking. And fact checking, I mean, the world of misinformation is not limited to fact checking. We're also trying to analyze a lot more which is connected to misinformation, such as psychology behind misinformation. Why do people fall for fake, quote unquote, fake news? Why do people believe misinformation even after when they've read a fact check? Or what is the kind of information, how your emotions probably play a role when you read a piece of information? These are the kind of stories that we're tracking on a regular basis to be able to present answers. And of course, this is all backed by research not done by us, but research done by researchers, by academics, who provide data, who provide evidence for all of these arguments, and then we basically present them in a manner which the audiences can understand, can relate to. Again, there's a very short clip I'll play for you to understand how we're
Have you heard
packaging
about the
these
recent
stories.
escalation of tensions in Ladakh? Look at these images.
But these are old images and have nothing to do with the current India-China standoff.
Doesn't matter. People need to know that an incident like that happened.
That's how people sometimes react, even after they are presented with facts on subjects they have strong opinions about. They reject the idea of fact checks and are likely to continue believing in what they want to due to various reasons. On the other hand, some people are more accepting.
So that's just an example to show you how we package these stories so that people are able to understand these, and people are able to understand the nuances and the research behind it. We're also very, very closely working at the intersection of hate speech, misinformation, and technology. Uh, I'm so sorry. I'm extremely sorry. I have a terrible cold. So we are very closely working at the intersection of misinformation, hate speech, and technology. We try and understand what social media platforms are doing to counter misinformation. What are their policies in place? Are the policies enough or not? So these are some areas that we're looking at. These are some.
Have you heard
stories,
about
these
the
are some.
recent
I'm
escalation of
sorry about
tensions
this.
in Ladakh? Look at these images.
Yeah. So these are some stories that we're tracking on a daily basis. These are some topics that we are tracking very, very closely. Just some examples to show you the sort of deep dives that we've done. But that is definitely not it. As I mentioned, that these probably are topics which we're looking at to explain why people are believing in fake news, why people sometimes reject the idea of a fact check. But of course, the daily misinformation or the kind of narratives that we see on social media is something we're tracking very, very, very closely. We're tracking social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Telegram. Because, of course, I'm sure all of you are aware there are lots and lots of groups on Telegrams, on Facebook, where you see narratives, where you see people probably talking about one thing. Maybe these are closed groups, or maybe these are open groups, where we a lot of times see how people are coming together, and a lot of times we are seeing it's like a galvanized effort, and they're pushing misinformation. So we are tracking all of these platforms, and we're tracking all of these spaces very, very closely, so that we're able to bring out the truth. Now, how do we fact check? Simple things. For instance, if I were to take an example of a story that we do on a daily basis, or the kind of stories that we do on a daily basis, what are the kind of things that you should keep in your mind while you're looking at a story? First, a fact check should not be based on opinion, it should be based on evidence. I, as a reader, do not probably want somebody's opinion, because that I'm getting from other op eds and maybe other stories that I'm reading. But in a fact check, what I want is to know the fact. And if you're giving me the fact, I don't want somebody's opinion probably. I would want to see hard evidence. I need tangible evidence to believe what you're telling me. Of course, that makes your story stronger, that makes your story a lot more solid. And of course, the reason why I also emphasize a lot on this is because a lot of times fact checkers are accused of bias. So when somebody accuses you of bias and you have absolutely nothing to back how you debunked a particular claim or how you came to the conclusion that you've actually drawn, it becomes a lot more harder for you to say that no, what you've done is factual. Hence, it's very, very important that your fact check story should be based on evidence and not somebody's opinion. Just because I said it or somebody else said it does not make it the truth. If you have hard evidence to prove something you're saying or you're debunking, it's a solid story from all angles. Also, speaking to the stakeholders sometimes who are involved in a particular story is something that adds a lot of credibility to your story. Second point, try and figure out if a claim is fact checkable. What do I mean by that? What I mean is a lot of times there's a very fine line between something that can be fact checked and something that cannot be fact checked. Now, maybe somebody's opinion, which is absolutely not based in fact, maybe cannot be fact checked. I can't do a fact check on that, right? So you have to also understand that there will be claims which you might just read and you'll be like, what is this? It's completely obnoxious probably. But you might also face a challenge where you feel that yes, it's an obnoxious claim, but at the same time I do not have hard evidence, or maybe I don't have any sort of evidence to debunk what they're saying. So that is also a very important differentiation that you have to make, and understand that there are certain claims that can be fact checked and there are certain that cannot be fact checked. uh, Third point, present, you need to present all the facts so that there is no iota of doubt. I think that's sort of circling back to the point that I made earlier, that involve all the stakeholders. Maybe it's a story about an individual, you should speak to the individual, you should speak to the other party. If, of course, if there's an accused and a victim, you speak to both the parties, you speak to the police, you speak to if anybody else is involved, and of course you look for some hard evidence which you'll find, and then you can call it a solid story where you're presenting facts along with evidence to tell your reader why something that probably is doing the rounds might not be the right information. Fact checking isn't just about tools and techniques, but it's also about good old school journalism, which is about speaking to all the parties involved. That's something that I've just spoken to you about. And one very, very important thing, denials do not make for a fact check. You go to any authority, and for instance, if I were to give you an example, the central bank in India, which is called the Reserve Bank of India, there's probably a story about how the government has decided to change the photo of, currently we have Mahatma Gandhi's photograph on our currency note. So if maybe there's a story which says that the government sources in the government are saying that the picture is going to be changed, and later if uh, RBI or somebody issues a denial, you might want to carry that story as a story and as a denial and not as a fact check. While of course Reserve Bank of India would know what the story is about, and of course they're the highest authority to speak about it because they are the ones who are printing notes, and of course it's the central bank of the country. But just to say that somebody issuing a denial, a police authority issuing a denial, somebody accused of doing something issuing a denial that no, I wasn't accused in this, maybe it does not make for a very strong story because it's the person who's been accused of something is issuing a denial. So denials don't always make for a fact check. In most cases, when you find evidence, in not most cases, in cases where you find evidence, in cases where you are able to back that claim with evidence, along with somebody saying that no, I didn't do that, or this is what the reality is, and you found proof for it, then yes, it could be a fact check. But denials do not, independent and only denials do not make for a fact check. Okay, a very quick question. I think this is a point that I repeated a couple of times. Do you think a fact check can be based on anybody's opinion? You can leave your answers in the chat box below. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so the next now I am going to just quickly talk to you about one of the fact checks that we had done. The claim was related to something that was happening in the country, which was related to banning of loudspeakers, which is put up on religious places. So there was a claim, and this entire thing, this controversy, this started from one of our states in the western part of the country, which is Maharashtra. So when this started, a lot of people started sharing this video. Sorry, I might not be able to play the video, but you can see a snippet of the video on your screen. People started playing this video, saying that this video shows people offering azan on the roads in Maharashtra, and this was on the back of that loudspeaker ban, which the opposition parties in Maharashtra were asking for. Now, of course, when we see a claim like this and you get down to fact checking, one of the most important things that you should ask yourself while fact checking is, number one, is the context of the video right? You should also question the timing of the video, that why are people circulating something like this right now? Again, context is the most important thing. Context is the key, because if something is relevant and something is some unrelated clip or media is being linked, is being used linked to that, then maybe you would be able to understand why is that being shared. So these are a couple of questions that you should ask yourself. So the first thing that we did was to conduct a reverse image search. I think all of you are aware of how to do a reverse image search. So I wouldn't get into the details of that, but we did a reverse image search and we found this video uploaded in April 2020, which basically meant that the video cannot be from 2022 when the controversy broke out. It's at least 2 years old. Now that's something we found, but we found the video on a YouTube channel which was very random, and I wasn't sure if we can trust it completely, because it's like one person saying it's Maharashtra, the other a random blog which I'm not sure about their credibility, um, whether that's right or not. So it's also important for us to be able to independently verify at least the location, because the location says it's Maharashtra. So what we did was we went through. Now you can see these boxes that we've created, right? Those are basically to highlight the shops that you can see in the background. Using those shops as clues, we were able to establish the location of the video. We basically found these three shops. We compared them to the satellite view that we saw on Google Maps, and we found that this was actually in Howrah in West Bengal, which is another state in India and not Maharashtra. So this is how we were able to conclusively prove and independently prove that the video was from West Bengal and it was definitely old. Yes, now one thing you might say that yes, you know the location, you know the date, but maybe you don't know what people are doing. Yes, that's true that in some cases you're not always able to verify what people were doing, but in this case we got in touch with the police authorities and they told us that it was during the lockdown, April 19, 2020. That's also when most of the countries were under a lockdown. People mentioned sorry, the authorities mentioned that it showed people offering azan on the road in West Bengal. So, of course, when what we generally do in such cases is we say that we've been able to independently verify that it's an old video. Hence, it's not linked to the azan loudspeaker row, which is broken out in Maharashtra. It's definitely from West Bengal because we're providing you proof for that. Plus, the police has told us that this is what the context of the video is. However, we've not been independently able to verify the context. So, yeah. Again, a very small question. I'm sure you guys will be able to answer this because I just mentioned the answer to all of you. Where were the shops located? Okay, I'm going to move on because I do realize that I came to the question a bit earlier. Sorry about that. Okay, now one very quick thing that I would want to talk to you guys about is how can you use data to your advantage? That's something that I've mentioned in the beginning of the slides when I spoke to you about Neta fact checks. Neta fact check, as I said, that we rely on data which is made available by the government or which is put together by government authorities, and we use that data or even data which is given by the ministers ministers of which is given by the ministers in the parliament. So all of this data, how do we use that to our advantage? Now let's say there are multiple claims which are made by politicians, right? And a lot of these claims, we do see them coming back, recirculating during elections. At least in India, we have seen that a lot of times you will see during elections politicians making these claims repeatedly. Sometimes these claims will come back, something that was even debunked way before would come back. So how we use this data to our advantage to tell the stories, right? So, for instance, if there is something they're talking about to do with the GDP of the country, so there's data which is made available by the Ministry of Stats, then that is the kind of data we can look at. If they're talking about some crime statistics, then there is something known as the National Crime Records Bureau in our country, which comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Then that is the kind of data we look at. Again, I'm not going to get into the intricate details of how you use this data or how you look for this data, but this is just to give you a sense that data can be used to your advantage. In fact, it's one of the strongest things that can be used to your advantage to fact check claims. I think, yeah, that's pretty much what I've just said. It's just covering that. And I'm happy to take any questions. Trina, over to you.
Thanks, Kritika, for sharing with us what goes on with misinformation in India and the hard work that fact checkers do in a huge country with more than 600 million internet users. I believe there are questions for Kritika streaming in already, so let's get right to it. So the first question is, while fact checking, we may have to view controversial posts or websites. How do you stop Google, Firefox, basically all the search engines from thinking that we're actually interested in such things? This person tried to use incognito mode, but extensions like invid can't be accessed there.
So you can access InVid even in incognito mode. There is an option which says allow InVid in incognito, and you can do that. Of course, when you use incognito, no history would be saved, and of course, you'd not be suggested similar things. However, having said that, coming to the first part of the question where she's asking how do you stop yourself from going down the rabbit hole, because honestly, it's the algorithm. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot you can do. Incognito is the only answer that even I can think of right now, to say that when you do not want similar posts, then even on YouTube, you use incognito so that you don't go down any rabbit hole. And definitely, you can add the extension to your incognito as well.
Right. And so there is also a second question which says that which social media or messaging platform tend to be the main sources of misinformation in India?
I would say, I wouldn't say main source, but I would say a very big source of misinformation in India would be WhatsApp and these days Telegram. I think the reason being Telegram is an open platform where anybody can join any group, and it's huge. The group size is huge as compared when you compare it to WhatsApp. So I think that's become a major source of misinformation.
Right. And the third question here says that they say a falsehood can travel halfway around the world before truth has time to tie its shoelaces. How do you get your fact checks out there and viewed by the public? And what are the challenges you face?
So I think a couple of things. So the first thing about timing, yes, I completely agree with you that the timing matters a lot. And in fact, there's a very common, I mean, there's something that people say that fake travels a lot more than truth. So that's something all the fact checkers, not just in India, I think across the world, are trying to fight. We're all trying to amplify our fact checks, collaborations. We all collaborate so that we are able to amplify this sort of work we are doing with the limited resources that most of the fact checkers have. Um, because you know what happens is it takes a few seconds, probably a couple of hours at max, to create something which is absolutely baseless, which is completely a lie. But it takes hours for us to fact check that. Of course, if you're going to say something which is completely out of the dark, out of the blue, and I have no idea where this is coming from, I will have to find out the source of that information first. I will have to then track what you said, where you got that information from, then find the fact of it. So it's not always this quick to do a fact check, as opposed to, creating something which is completely false. So I definitely, I'm sorry, but I don't have an answer or definitive answer to say that yeah, fact check can be done in an hour, it can be done in 2 hours, it can be done in a day. Sometimes it takes us 2 to 3 days to do fact check, especially when we're trying to get in touch with other people, sometimes in other parts of the country, sometimes in other parts of the world. So it takes us a lot of time, and I think everybody in the fact checking community is aware of that problem, that facts putting out a fact check takes a lot more time as compared to all these fakes which are circulating. Number two, about your question was about what do you do so that more people are able to consume. Number one would be collaborations. I think this is my opinion. I feel collaborations work because when multiple fact checking organizations come together and they amplify each other's work, so when you put collaboration over competition, you will be able to fight that one common enemy that all of us have. Number two, formats. As I mentioned, this is something we are experimenting with ourselves. Reels, these are short videos. People do not have that sort of retention anymore, that where they'll sit down and read a 10-minute article. Probably some of us will, not all of us, and the data tells us that. So short reels, which are now 90 seconds, earlier they were 60 seconds, uh, they can be used in an innovative manner with some trending music, with some trend, with something that's trending, to push those fact checks where people are consuming probably that amount of misinformation. YT shots, um I think all of these things. It's basically to play around with the format. And as I mentioned, Verify Kiya Kya, one of our series. The reason why we started that series is so that we can tell our viewers about how you do all of this on your own, because we still are a small community. Even if you're talking about 16 or 17, I think, fact checkers, there are ISN certified fact checking organizations in India. Maybe there are more which aren't certified, but you're talking about those, let's say 15, 20 organizations versus a huge world of misinformation. So long story short, it's, I think, a lot of experimentation is the answer. And the drawback is that yes, sometimes fact checking takes a lot of time, but maybe that's something you can't do much about, because that's really not the solution, to put out something which is shoddy and not backed by facts just because you want to uh, debunk something. I think it's very, very important to be 100% sure of everything that you're saying in your story, especially a fact check.
So the next question I thought is quite interesting because no one has ever mentioned about paid misinformation campaign, right? So I think this is quite interesting. Do fake news related to politics spread via some paid groups, or is this a mistake by some common man?
Um, I think it's not just, of course. I think it'll be very naive of us to say that this misinformation is only being circulated by some is being circulated by the common man, or is being circulated by just some users on social media. That's definitely not the truth. Of course, political parties are also involved, and across party lines. So that's the reason when I said that we also have this series called Neta Fact Check, where we fact check claims made by politicians. We also see a coordinated effort sometimes, a lot of times actually, on social media, where we see politicians, leaders, politicians of a particular political party coming together, sometimes just amplifying one sort of tweet, which might not be misinformation always, but which is misinformation. Sometimes it's to um, support a particular narrative. So it's definitely not just common man. It's definitely not some random users on social media who fell for it. Because uh, sorry if I'm going to take a little longer, but I just want to mention one very small thing over here. There's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is something you spread unknowingly. Disinformation is something you spread intentionally. So if we want to believe that it's just some common users sharing it, then I think there would be no difference, because I wasn't aware and I just shared it because I cared for somebody else, maybe, right? So I think it's definitely a combination of all of these factors.
Right. And so I'm going to take the question 5 and 6 together because they're very similar. But basically, the question is about, how do you determine if a source is credible given that government organizations can lie as well, right? So I guess the question is really like, how do we can we trust government sources, and how do we, fact check government sources as well?
Okay, so number one, yes, you're absolutely right. Sometimes we might feel that the government is inflating some figures or the government data itself. How do you use government data to fact check what the government is saying, right? So in that case, you have experts to speak to. In that also case, you have independent researchers who are working very closely and who are putting together data in most of the fields. What I meant when I say that we rely on government data is to basically say, if let's say an XYZ politician has made a particular claim about the country's GDP or a state's GDP, and if that claim, if they are saying that the GDP grew from X to Y, but even in the data that is that has been provided by the government, that growth you can't see. If they are saying there's been a 50% growth, sorry, I'm just throwing random numbers, don't take me on the numbers, but if they're talking about a 50% increase in the GDP of the country, and the government data itself is not corroborating that claim, that is what I say, that sometimes government data comes in, sometimes not, actually not sometimes, most of the times government data comes in really really handy, because then you can point out those loopholes and say that while you yourself today are saying a 50% increase in this state's GDP, your data itself is not backing the claim you've made. That's number one. Number two, the point about how do you verify the credibility of government organizations. I think this there is a limitation, but of course, the data which has been made available by the government, that's the data. Like for instance, when I say NCRB data, that's the data we have to believe when you are talking about crime statistics in the country. But of course, having said that, there are independent organizations which are researching, which are putting together data based on sources, not sources, but based on whatever methodology they are following. And sometimes you present those pictures, you present that picture that, well, the government data says this and the independent data says this. But when you're able to point loopholes based on the government data itself, saying that, hey, while there is a huge discrepancy between these two, independent and government, your own data is not backing your claim. So I hope I've been able to answer that question.
Yes. Yes. So basically, we can always use data to like fact check each other, and sometimes they can contradict themselves as well, right?
Yeah, and I think that only adds to your story. In fact, I remember I've done that in one of my own stories where they were talking about some riots in one of the states in India, in Gujarat, where the government said that according to the NCRB data, the data was different. According to the answers given by one of the ministers in the parliament, was different. So we mentioned that there is a huge discrepancy between the data, but none of the two match what the person who had made that claim, or the MP who had made that claim. So it only you present all the facts that you have in front of you.
Yep. So I think this is also another interesting question, because our audience now is all between the range of ages of 15 to 24, and I guess they're quite curious. Are older generations more prone to believing in fake news?
um I don't know. I don't think so. I've seen any research or study which says that older generation is more prone to it. So I don't think so. It'll be right for me to comment to say a yes or a no. No, I don't think so. I can answer that with a yes or a no. Of course, we've seen. I mean, we've generally seen people very early on also falling for misinformation. While I know it's a running joke in most of the WhatsApp groups that all these fake messages, all these good mornings and good evenings are coming from your uncles and aunties and grandparents. But I'm not too sure. At least I have not come across any data which says that older people are more prone to misinformation, or that's the age group which is more vulnerable. So I'm sorry. I don't think so. I would say a yes or a no.
So there is this other question as well. I think how do you track the fake messages forwarded on WhatsApp, since it isn't like Instagram or Twitter and can't be read publicly? And I think this is a problem that fact checkers encounter, right? Because it's impossible to track the messages on WhatsApp. So what steps do you take then, and what do you prioritize then?
Okay, so how do we track on WhatsApp? We have a WhatsApp deadline number, which is a public number, which we plug almost everywhere. It's on our website, it's on our social media handles, it's on our section page, it's at the end of all our videos, where we tell and we urge all our users to send us any query on our WhatsApp number. So, of course, let's say if you as a user have received a query and you would want us to fact check that, and you've received that on WhatsApp, you can forward it to us on our WhatsApp reply number, and we'll be happy to fact check it and send it back to you and tell you what the truth is. So that is one way of fact checking. You've rightly said that it's very difficult to track everything on WhatsApp because of end-to-end encryption. So there's very little we can do in terms of doing that. But of course, there are groups that, of course, as journalists, if there are certain groups we're part of and we are seeing some sort of misinformation, and then we track it online and see that, yeah, it's also something which is circulating on Facebook and Twitter and Telegram and other places, then of course it'll be a story. How do we prioritize in terms of what should be fact checked and what should not be? I think there are a couple of steps that I generally follow. And of course, it's not like a rule book that you have to do that. It's just something I have been doing for a couple of years. Number one, the newsiness of something. Of course, when there's a breaking news situation, there's always, I often say that I often feel that there is an information vacuum that's created because of the limited amount of information which is available in a breaking news situation, especially. So you see that vacuum being filled by misinformation. So, of course, being a part of the news organization and being a journalist, we track anything which is newsy and anything that's newsy. And in addition to that, that's likely to have um, an impact on the public, which was likely to create unrest, likely to create disharmony, likely to create any kind of direct, likely to have any sort of direct impact on any individual or community. Those are the kind of stories we would definitely prioritize and we definitely pick. Uh, so that will be newsiness. That will be how it's going to, like, if it's detrimental, then there would be how viral a particular claim is. But I mean, not always do we care about, oh, it's got 20 million views, so we should pick it, and it's only got 2 lakh views, we shouldn't pick it. Of course, even something which has got 2 lakh views and is likely to,
Spiral
cause
out of
violence
control.
is likely to blow out of control, blow out of proportion, then that's something we'll pick. With COVID, there was so much of misinformation that we've seen, and of course, misinformation has uh, direct consequences on a person's health. So that's something we would prioritize, we would pick. Yeah, I think these are some simple things that we keep in mind while trying to, and of course, narratives in the sense that a lot of political narratives we see, and we see that, this is being done because of this particular reason, given there is so much that's happening, given the political situation of the country currently, and there's so much happening in the country. Those are certain things that we keep in mind while we're fact checking all of this.
Which brings us to the last question, because you talked about politicians, right? So, do politicians interfere or try to silence fact checkers?
Uh, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, because of course there is obviously some sort of there's obviously an ongoing debate about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, where we see how journalists, so it's not just about fact checkers, I feel. It's not just about fact checkers being told that you can't publish this or you cannot do this, but of course, in general, we are seeing India's ranking in terms of media freedom, in terms of freedom in India's ranking in the, yeah, media freedom ranking in India has been going down. So, I mean, that speaks volumes about what's currently happening in the country. Um, so, yeah, while I wouldn't say that there is a direct summon or a direct email or something that you receive from any government, or at least, I mean, that you receive from anybody saying that, hey, why did you publish a fact check like that? But of course, there are indirect ways of probably trying to silence journalists, trying to uh, push back, trying to not let those stories come out that you think would be detrimental, maybe. So, I mean, yeah, it's not, I don't think so it's only to say about politicians or it's only to say about journalists. I think in general that's in the public domain. uh Unfortunately, the ranking has been going down.
Right. So it seems that it's quite a challenging and trying time as well for fact checkers, simply because of the fact that the environment has grown and become more hostile over the years. And I think, unfortunately, we're way past time. We have come to the end of today's session. This marks the end of Chapter 2, Meet the Legends. Thank you so much, Kritika. So we'll be taking a summer break and we'll come back in September. Until then, please get your teammates ready, prepare yourself, and sign up for Chapter 3, a detective's test. So the challenges will be much harder in Chapter 3 and will test whatever that you have learned throughout this journey. Now, and of course, as we progress on further in the verification challenge, the swag will only get better with every progressing chapter. We will update the website verificationchallenge.com tomorrow with details for team signups. So stick around, register your team, and we will see you in September. Until we meet again, the Google News Initiative APAC crew will miss you guys. So take care, stay safe, and good luck with Chapter 3. Bye.